Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Washington Retirement Planning Podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Meikle, and if you're new here, I help Washington State employees get a better understanding of how their confusing retirement benefits work so you can hopefully take that information, retire earlier, spend more time with your loved ones, and ultimately pay less in taxes overall. Today we're going to be talking about financial planning for couples. We'll be going over a few steps that you guys can take as a couple to get a better understanding of how your finances work and what you guys can do together to help maximize your retirement benefits and ultimately build a bigger and better future. I'll also be taking the time to answer another listener question. Today's question comes from Anne, who I had the pleasure of meeting with just a few weeks ago. Now, Anne's question was just asking for tips for young professionals on what they could be doing now to help set themselves up for success later. So I got a couple of tips to pass on to you guys, and we'll be sure to cover that towards the end of the episode. Now, on to the main topic of today, financial planning for couples. So the first step in this process, as always, is going to be communication. Communication is key. You guys want to make sure you're on the same page when it comes to finances. Even if one spouse handles it all and the spouse has nothing to do with it, you still need to come together and talk about stuff. Going from budgeting, investing, and really the main thing you want to start off with is your goal planning. After all, you can't really start a path unless you know where the destination is. So you need to know what kind of goal you want to. Now, I would ask you guys to stay away from money goals. So saving up for $1 million retirement sounds cool, but really doesn't mean much to people. Everyone's retirement is different, and I wouldn't shoot for any particular number in general. Instead, you want to focus on the key things like, do we want to have our house paid off by a certain time? Do I want to be retired at 62 or 65? Things of that nature. Something with a little more concrete that we have a bit more control over. So we want to start with what our goals are. And once we have those goals set in stone, then we can kind of work backwards and figure out a plan of how to get there. So start off with that, and you want to be kind of open with what our plans are. And keep in mind that you guys may have some disagreements. So we have some couples that one person wants to pay off the house early and the other one doesn't. So you guys have to kind of come together and try to figure out which we want to go and try to find some kind of middle ground there. This is something that we see all the time in some of our meetings. And our favorite couples by far to work with are the ones that are both there, that show up and both of them are actively engaged, and you know that they have good communication skills because they both know what's going on. And I can ask either anyone of the questions and they'll give me pretty much the same answer for what they're thinking, what they're planning. The ones that I kind of worry about are the ones that show up with just one spouse present, the other one is too busy, or you shouldn't even see them sitting on the couch in the background. They're just like, can't be bothered to talk about their finances because it doesn't apply to them or something like that. Those usually not good situations. Other ones is when one spouse just kind of sits there and doesn't say anything. Really questions, do they want to be there? Do they know what's going on? They need to be a part of it, because if something happens to that one spouse, you're going to have all figured out what other documents are, what your passwords are, what the plan is. And chances are, if you weren't engaged all these years, you're going to be kind of in over your head. So we want to be engaged. By far, I guess the funniest ones to deal with are the ones where that spouse, usually the husband, is off on the side of the camera, kind of like this. And you can see their hands just folded. And you can tell they don't want to be there. And I guess that, the wife's made them sit there or something like that, but they're sitting there even off camera. So they like really don't want to be there. Those couples most times are usually in not the best place financially, at least from a communication standpoint. They don't know what's really going on. So make sure you have good communication skills. And when you guys show up to a meeting, whether it be me or someone else, be present, be active, both be in the frame. It makes everyone look a little better just in general. All right, second step. Now that we have our goal set up, what you guys want to be doing is now working on a budget. I know no one likes budgeting. It sucks. You're seeing where all your money goes and kind of hurts, but it can be really eye-opening to actually sit down and see where the money is going. It doesn't have to be something that is real specific. You can just kind of give yourself ballpark ideas of what your budget could be. But the best thing to do is to go back over the last 12 months. Yes, I know I said 12 months. Go through the bank statements, credit card transactions, and kind of get an idea of where you stand. Now, you want a quick tip on the easy way to do this is you want to have an aggregator app that can kind of pull these transactions for you. Then you can just download it all in one file. So personally, I use something like Mint. I just have all my credit cards, bank accounts listed there. So end of the month, I can go in there. I can just say, hey, download all credit card transactions, all bank transactions. And then I just pull them all into one Excel sheet. I hit that, get the sum of it all. And I instantly have, what income was, what the expenses were for that month. So it doesn't have to take a lot of time. You just have to have the proper tools in place to help you guys get that set up. When you do this, you might be kind of surprised that the numbers might be higher than you think. I know that was the case for me when I did this same exercise for our household. So sitting down and getting the budget actually on paper to see what is actually going out, not what you think is going out, is important. Because once you know what you're spending, you can see areas you can be cutting back on and really see how much money is left over that could be used towards saving for your goals. So once you have all that set up and your budget's in place, step 3 is deciding what to do with the extra leftover money. So before you go and do anything extra above, the basic, mortgage, food bills, something like that, you want to make sure that you're saving enough for yourself in the future. So savings comes into play, and that's something that you need a lot of communication with as well, is where are we going to be saving this money? Does it go into my retirement plan? Does it go to your retirement plan? Do we have our own independent one, like an IRA? So you kind of got to talk and decide what's the best place to go for that. That's where advisors come into play, as well as helping you guys figure out the best strategy to use for that. If someone has a match, it usually makes sense to put it in that person's account at least till you hit the match, and then you can figure out what to do with the excess money after that. Figuring out kind of where to go and then what stocks to pick would be the next step there. Now, after that, or you could probably even argue before that, you want to make sure that you have the proper insurance coverages in place. After all, what good is all the assets and money that you have if it can all be lost like that because you don't have the proper risk protection in place? So when we talk risk protection or insurance here, we gotta look at all of it. We gotta look at our home insurance policies, your car insurance policies. If you have $500,000 saved for retirement, but you're running minimum coverages on your vehicles, chances are you get into one bad accident and they kind of hit limits on your policy and they need more. Where are they going to go? That's right, they're going to go right to your retirement account. So you want to make sure you have enough coverage in place that they can take the car insurance company's money and not yours. Other things to consider are something like umbrella policies. They're a policy relatively inexpensive that gives extra liability coverage that goes over your house and your car, right? It's the umbrella. So it's just an extra line of defense to help cover assets, especially when you start going over the $500,000 asset level. That's usually where the car insurance coverage kind of top out at. So once you start crossing over that area, that's when a good time to look at umbrella policies would be. Next would be looking at something like life insurance. So you want to make sure you have something in place that if someone passes away, you can replace their income. That's the number one reason for life insurance. Yes, paying off debt and debt is part of the reason too, but the biggest asset most people have is their ability to work and earn income. A rule of thumb I like to tell people is you need about $1 million of coverage for every $50,000 of income you need to replace. So if I work and make $100,000 a year, I should have at least $2 million of coverage. Why? Because if my wife were to get $2 million and she could take 5% of that a year, it'd be $100,000. It would essentially replace all of my income that was lost. If it's invested correctly, it should keep maintaining that for years to come. So that's why you need to have the proper level of insurance in place. I know some people have your small plans, 250, 500,000, just to cover the house. That's great. But once the house is paid off, there's still gonna be bills to come that need to be paid. So you need to have something to help replace your income. Life insurance is a great tool for that. Next step is kind of dealing with the debt part of it. So if we have student loan debt, mortgages, cars, things like that, is what strategy are we going to use to help pay off the debt? So there's a couple different ways you can go about it. I usually use something called an avalanche rule. So basically I'll take any debt payments and I'm going to sort them by highest interest to lowest interest, and I pay off the highest interest one first. I know some people like to go highest balance to lowest balance, and things like that, or reverse, even lowest balance to highest balance. And the idea is that I pay off the lowest balance, I can use the minimum payment and snowball it down that way. Could work, but if my lowest balance one is only charging me 2% and my highest balance one is charging me 30, I'm going to make a bigger dent as far as saving an interest if I start paying off the higher interest one first. So that's the way I look at it when doing kind of debt payoff strategies for people. Now, another good thing to have as a couple is making sure that you have money set aside in an emergency fund to cover any kind of one-off expenses, right? So maintenance on the house, you have to change the tires in your car, things like that. You want to make sure you have some kind of money on the side set up to cover these kind of one-off expenses that can kind of come out of nowhere for you. Now, the important thing, and what I see what a lot of couples do, is get carried away with this. Instead of having 20 or 30,000 in there, they have 50,000, 100,000, sometimes even $200,000 in cash, just sitting there for just in case. Now, can you tell me what in the world could possibly happen that you need $200,000 liquid to spend like that? Unless you're buying real estate or something like that, that's probably a bit too much, and you're just losing a lot of interest, especially if you're not putting in a high yield interest account. While emergency savings is important, don't get too carried away with it, Because especially remember that once you're at retirement age, all the money you have, regardless of what retirement account it is liquid and accessible to you. So you don't need to have such a high excess at that time. Now, the final step to all this is maintenance. So it's one thing to go ahead and get a plan all set up, but it's another thing to maintain it. Because over time, things are going to change. Income changes, your lifestyle changes, and you want to make sure that you're keeping up with this. You want to make sure that the budget's staying intact, that your investment strategies are staying there. If you notice your savings are starting to creep up, hey, maybe I need to increase my savings. If I see my savings do the opposite and start to go down, maybe I got to go ahead and adjust the budget. So regular maintenance is really important. If you need some accountability and help with that, that's where an advisor might come into play. Someone that's a third party, kind of independent, that can look at your strategy and kind of tell you guys what you guys need to do to help increase your odds of achieving your goals. All right, so on to the question of the day, which comes from Anne. And again, the question is, what tips do you have for young professionals who are just getting started in their careers in terms of getting a strong start towards retirement, savings, and planning? And so as far as what tips to go is, you always want to start with taking inventory of where you're at. So make a list of what your income sources are, where that money's going, so what we're spending it on, what your retirement assets are, what your liabilities are. So take a inventory, and you want to put that all together and essentially make your own balance sheet. So a balance sheet, just like how you've probably heard the term before that all companies have, and essentially lists what their assets are minus their liabilities is their net worth. You want to keep track of that for your household. It's something you don't have to pay like super close attention to, but it's something to update kind of once a year. And you can slowly see yourself track upwards as you start paying those debt down. As those assets starts growing, you'll see your net worth start getting bigger and bigger. So now once you figure out kind of where you're at, next step is I'll dig into your budget. So I always say that the only thing stopping you from retiring is you don't have the income to replace it. So look what kind of income is coming in now and where it's going. Is there anything I can get rid of or reduce to help free up some cash flow so I can put it towards building other assets? I always take an inventory of what needs to go. Now, a couple of hidden ones you guys might not know about. So go ahead and look at your car insurance. If you're paying monthly for car insurance, if you switch that to quarterly, semi-annually, or annually, that alone could shave off a couple $100 off of your car insurance bill. Other thing you can look at is look at your deductible. If you have a healthy emergency fund, you probably don't need your deductible being $100. You could probably increase that to $500 or $1,000. Because when we have higher deductibles, typically means that you're less likely to use the insurance, otherwise you just pay out of pocket. And the insurance comes reflect that in terms typically of lower premiums. So take a look at your property and casualty insurance to see if you can increase deductibles or change the frequency of how you make payments. And that alone can usually free up a couple $100 per year. Next step I'd go with is look where your assets are sitting. Emergency funds sitting in big banks these days aren't doing squat, and you're really making them more money than they are giving you. So right now, what's really good to use is something called high yield savings accounts. So just like the savings accounts I'm sure you guys already have, except these ones are typically online. They're still FDIC insured. There's typically no minimums. There's no fees. They just pay a lot more money than what big banks pay. And to put it in perspective, the average bank right now pays 0.06% a year, which is like nothing. You go to a high yield savings account, these things are paying somewhere between 4 and 5%. Now, as interest rates start to come down, which we're expecting to this year, you can expect the high yield savings accounts to also come down. So maybe next year they might only pay 3%, but 3% is still going to be better than 0.06. So the sooner you guys can make that move, the sooner you can start earning interest on that money. Next step I would just say is take some time to learn or get an idea of how taxes work and how it impacts you. Because at the end of the day, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. And we don't want to give the IRS any tips. So a common thing I've seen the last 4 or 5 tax returns I've reviewed is they're getting hit with underpayment penalties. So a lot of people don't know this, but the IRS is just like us in terms of they like getting paid evenly. They don't like when we wait till April to pay them. So if you owe a large chunk of money in a given year and you wait till April to pay them, typically you get hit with an underpayment penalty. Now, if you think about it, if you work for your employer and instead of paying you at the end of the year, your last paycheck, they said, we'll give it to you in April, you wouldn't probably be too happy with that. You'd probably say, hey, you got to owe me for the hassle of going 4 months without my pay. IRS does the same thing. They like getting paid evenly. So when we wait too long to pay them, that's when we hit penalties. So in case you're not aware of it yet, the tax deadline is different than the tax filing deadline. So April 15th, that's the day you have to file your tax return. That's not the day taxes are due. Your taxes are due January 16th. That's when you're supposed to have all your taxes paid up. Yeah, you can pay it after that, but that's typically when you get hit with those penalties if you're not at the safe harbor number. And for reference, a safe harbor number is the number of taxes that you need to pay to the IRS in a certain year to avoid those unearned payment penalties. So that number is going to be based off of what your tax bill was last year. So if last year, your line 11, like how much the IRS actually kept from your taxes, let's say it was $10,000, your safe harbor number for this year would either be $10,000 or $11,000, which is just 10% more if you made over $150,000 in the year. So knowing your safe harbor number is important for avoiding these unearned payment penalties. Now, the last tip I'd say is really just to start saving early as possible and just be consistent with it. So I see too many people get started way too late. They're so focused on, having fun or paying down meaningless debt. They're so focused on paying down their car loans that are charging them 3 or 4%, or they're worried about their mortgage rate being at 5 or 6%. Honestly, those rates, they're really not that bad. Yeah, they're twice as more than it was a couple years ago, but the grand scheme of things, paying 6% is not going to kill you. What kills you is not putting money away for your retirement and missing out on those returns. Case in point, 2023 S&P 500 index returned 26%. So if you didn't put any money in that, and you said, oh, no, I'm going to pay down my mortgage instead because it's charging me 6%, congratulations, you might have saved 6%, but you missed out on earning 26%. And when you look at the way compound interest works, over time, as your mortgage comes down, the amount of interest you're paying slowly goes down. Whereas when you're saving money, it compounds every year and it slowly starts to build on itself. So you can be the person that does the 15-year mortgage, puts everything they can into it. So the time you're 45, 50, you don't have a mortgage anymore. That's great, but now you have less time to make it up. And time in the market is so important. The person that stays in the market the longest, you're going to get more good years than people that are in there for just 10 or 15 years. So you want to be consistently saving into the market because you never know which year is going to be good, which year is going to be bad. And it could happen that while you have a mortgage, you can put more money away. If the market's flat for 5 or 6 years or just down, then it's not going to work out at all. So put money away first. Pay yourself first before you worry about paying down your other debt like that. Now, credit cards, different story. They're charging 25%. Absolutely pay that off. But when you're talking about low interest, single digit numbers, I wouldn't be too overly concerned with paying them down if you're not adequately putting enough money away. Now, when it comes to what do I select, what do I invest in? Obviously, it does depend on risk tolerance wise and stuff, but I took a big step in making it as easy as possible for you guys. So we have our, Plan 3, our DCP, and 403B investment advice systems out there. So at any time, anyone in Washington State, come on, you can subscribe to the plan. And you just basically let us know what account you need help on, whether it's just Plan 3, just DCP, or both. And then you tell us what risk tolerance you want. So if you're young, you're probably going to be more on the aggressive side of things because you have more time in the market. If the money goes down by 50% tomorrow, you're not retiring tomorrow, so you can probably wait out the storm. So when you're young, you can be aggressive with it. Our models will tell you exactly what to purchase inside of those accounts and when, which is the really cool part, when to make changes to them. Now we have strategic models, which is kind of your buy and hold. So every quarter, you'll get an update. So you log in once, you put the trades in, and then forget about it for 3 months. Come back in, we'll tell you what to make changes. So it's very low time commitment in that aspect. Then if you want to be a little more hands-on, we have tactical models, which just means more active trading. And we basically track a couple of key indicators in the market. And when 2 out of the 3 flash red at us, we start to raise cash. So go back to 2022, our tactical models flashed red in January. And we said, hey, go to cash. And we had about 55% of people's money, or we recommended that they hold about 55% in cash, which kind of seems crazy. But if you look what happened in 2022, the market went down in January, February, continued all the way down until October when it bottomed. Now our model said, hey, in September, deploy your cash back into the markets. So it timed it almost nearly perfectly where the bottom was, and it's been up ever since. So that's just tactical investing or trying to time the market. doesn't always work out, but that's just one recent case that it actually did work out in our favor. They hold half their cash, they missed most of that 20 some odd percent downturn, and they were to buy back in at the bottom and reap the rewards. So that's tactical investing. You have both options. You can switch between both of them inside of that model. All right, so if you want more information on that, links are going to be in the show notes below. I'll catch you guys all next week, and remember that your future depends on what you do today. All right, before I sign off, just a real quick legal disclosure that we're required to say as licensed fiduciary advisors. So remember that this is a podcast. It is designed for educational and entertainment purposes only. I don't know you personally, therefore I cannot give you any personal advice. So please don't take anything that we say on the show as being personal, financial, legal, or tax advice. If you want that kind of stuff, make sure you seek out a professional so they can help you with the strategies and investments that are right for you. Also, please remember that despite the name of our show, we are in no way associated with Washington State or the Department of Guidance Systems or any other Washington employer. We're a private-owned firm that specializes in working with Washington State employees, which is why we know so much about this stuff. So remember, we don't work for the state in any way, shape, or form, so please don't confuse us as being an official representative of the state. All right, that's it for the legal stuff. I'll catch you guys all next time.